Hey guys, welcome back. So, exciting news. We now have channel tiers, we have super chats, and we have merch. You can check out those links below to help support the channel. Grab yourself some gear, some mugs, stickers, hats, stuff. I got stuff. There's stuff to buy. Just check it out. Okay, thanks, bye. I need yins to know that when I typed out the title of this one, I had the most self-satisfied smirk on my face. Now, normally, I don't like the idea of having to hurt someone, human or otherwise, but it felt good to finally give it back to that bastard. Now, don't worry, we'll get there, but, well, first things first. Clerk of Courts. I won't disclose the name of the village my apartment is located in. Yes, village. That's how small it is. One of those little blink-and-you-miss-it areas with only a Dollar General and a Dairy Queen to let you know that the outdated buildings are still inhabited. Anyone from the rural Midwest knows of at least 3 places like this. It's located just outside the limits of the suburban area that make up the highest volume of Orion's calls. Victor learned from an employee at the Clerk of Courts that it is horribly underfunded, and due to that, there are still a lot of paper records that have yet to be digitized. They really fell behind after COVID. So, they've been trying to scan things in from as far back as 2020. Since I moved here from Pitt 3 years ago, mine should still be on paper. The question was if we could get to them before the mechanic could, without getting arrested in the process. Luckily, I found out that Victor can turn into a cat. While I was staying with him, he'd taken the couch, offering me the bed despite me saying that I didn't care either way. Because of his condition, he can't salt off his entire apartment, and so he secured the hall leading up to the bedroom and the windows, leaving the front door open so that he could take care of any potential blood cravings. And just to be extra safe, I also salted the bedroom door. Even though I felt more secure knowing that I wasn't alone, I still had trouble sleeping. The exhaustion was starting to get to me, and I had a headache behind my left eye that refused to go away, and my appetite was gone. It felt like I was living in slow motion. The morning after the mechanic brutalized my father, I discovered a fluffy black cat sitting on the middle cushion, paw resting on an open book to keep the pages from turning. Initially, I didn't make the connection. In my defense, I was exhausted. There are a few neighbors that can take the form of felines, so at first, I thought it could be one of them. Did one somehow get past him through the front door? Well, hey there, kitty, I cooed, keeping my suspicions out of my voice, putting my palm out for it to sniff. The cat raised its head and glared at me. I recognized that icy glaze instantly. No one gets as annoyed with me as Victor does. I raised my hands at him. You didn't think to mention this? The cat grumbled before trotting off down the hall. Shortly after, Victor stalked into the room, tying a bandana around his permanently slit throat. I didn't mention it because I was still learning about it myself, he explained. When? About 3 days ago. Figured it wasn't thrilling enough to make a fuss about. How in the hell is turning into a cat not thrilling? Okay, Vic, hold on. I remember reading about a draugr being able to grow to the size of a barn. Are you able to do that? Or shrink to be as small as a mouse? As far as I know. Only emotionally. He replied flatly. To summarize the rest of this conversation, he'd been testing himself for a while to learn more about what he'd become. So far, it's been easier said than done, especially since he's been busy balancing his obligations to the hunt with his regular duties at Orion. He figured out about the cat thing after meditating for the first time. He said he'd felt the need to clear his head and thought that it couldn't hurt to give mindfulness a whirl. The next thing he knew, he was on 4 legs. When I'd caught him reading, that had been his way of training himself to hold on to that mindfulness while distractions were in place. Yins may be wondering, what does this have to do with the Clerk of Courts? Raina distracted the tired receptionist with some pressing questions about a marriage license. He didn't even notice that a cat trotted past him after Raina set her backpack down on the ground. After she was certain that the boss hadn't been discovered, she joined me where I waited in her car outside. It was the only vehicle that the mechanic wouldn't easily recognize if he made a move. Fidgety. She pulled down the visor, looking unnerved with her own reflection. Her facial injuries were a lot better, and by this point, most of the scratches had healed to thin, dark lines around her eyes that seemed like they'd disappear completely within a few more weeks. However, the one that went through her eyebrow to the bridge of her nose looked like it was there to stay. Speaking from experience, facial scarring does take some time to get used to. Raina quickly shut the mirror. With an anxious huff, Raina commented, "Now, I don't want to bring this energy into the world, but if Psycho Mantis shows up, what then?" "By this time, he should still be at his shop," I replied. "But if he decides to drop by, I'll find some way to keep him out. He won't resist the chance to try to fuck with me." Raina looked concerned. "Won't that make things worse?" I sighed heavily. "Probably. It'll be even more of a nightmare if he finds out my name, though. I'll take a few minutes of psychological torment over an eternity of it any day. For the record, I don't know if the poor souls trapped in the trees are there forever, or if they someday fade away. But my point still stands. The mechanic was going to continue to try breaking me down regardless of my behavior." She shuddered. "Well, when you put it that way." There was a movement at one of the clerk of court's open windows. A little black paw was waving through it. Raina jumped out of the car, glancing around, looking suspicious as hell. When she got to the window, she stood on her tiptoes, reaching in, retrieving a manila envelope first, and then sliding it into her backpack. Then she grabbed Victor, cradling him awkwardly as if acutely aware that he was her boss. He looked equally unenthused to be held. In other words, his impression of a regular cat is pretty convincing. Raina's eyes suddenly got big, and then she sprinted back to the Monte Carlo, shoving both cat and the backpack at me. Victor let out an irritated meow as he hit my lap abruptly. She started the car and then zoomed off as if we just robbed a bank. When I made a comment about it, she told me to look behind us. Blue truck. It was coming down the road. As it approached the clerk of courts, his blinker turned on. I shivered. We just missed him. I stared into the mirror, expecting him to turn around and pursue us at any second. Our exit was extremely suspicious. And if he recognized us, it wouldn't be hard to deduce what we'd been there for. The mechanic got out and simply waltzed into the building, most likely to enchant the poor receptionist into handing my life over to him. He hadn't recognized us. We'd gotten very lucky. I'd gotten lucky. 1 minute later on our end, and he would have had my name. Raina said what we were all thinking. That was way too close. All I could do was nod. We were all on edge the entire ride to Raina's apartment. I searched through the envelope, worried that something was missing. A change of address, military discharge, voting registration, tax documents. Well, it looked like it was all there, but my nerves were convincing me that something was left behind. I double and triple checked. It's all there, try to calm down. We made it to Raina's apartment without issue, instantly salting the door the moment we were all inside. Victor was back to normal, trying to convince Fireball to come close enough to be pet. The skunk wasn't sure about him. While Raina dug through her hall closet, I checked yet again to make sure everything was there. She eventually waved me over to reveal a safe that she had hidden behind all of the coats. We stored my records in it, placing salt around the folders as well as the other documents Raina had saved. Our hope was that since the mechanic didn't know as much about her apartment would be the last place he'd look. And even if he did find out, he wouldn't be able to reach them. And once it was completed, Raina announced that she had half a bottle of strawberry margarita mix. Victor doesn't drink, so she and I split his share. Between the cheap tasty alcohol and the comfort of their company and watching Fireball trot around with her poofy tail in the air, I slowly felt the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen. My name was as secure as it could be, for the moment. That was one less thing to worry about. Now, I should also mention that I'd called my mom the night my father was slain. Killed just seems too mild of a word to describe what happened to him. I'd been in the midst of panic when she'd answered. She knows about Orient services, and as someone that grew up around the atypical, she initially tried to dissuade me from taking the job. And back then, I had assured her that we only deal with the less malicious neighbors, citing the housekeeper's infestation I told Jens about before. And normally that's true. When I told Mom about what happened to the sperm donor, she was speechless. After she recovered from shock, she assured me that she never stopped her practice assaulting her home, thanks to stories from Grandma. She also promised to carry a container of it with her and went to locate some iron to defend herself, if it came down to it. I described the mechanic to her just so she'd known what to look out for, also warning her to avoid his eyes. And if she heard a banjo or any other stringed instrument, to get as far away from it as possible. "Well, no more country bars for me, I guess," she quipped, her default way of coping with stress. Mom was reasonably nervous, though she said it was more for me than herself. "Don't worry about me, Nessa," she began. "You just get yourself out of this alive, all right?" "Will do, Mom." After a moment, she then added, "Please be careful. I don't know what I'd do if I lost you." That last bit made me cry. I heard her sniff from the other end. I feel terrible that I put her in this position. I don't know what other measures I could have taken to prevent this scenario, but there must have been something I missed. No matter what, I have to stay alive. Not just for my sake, but for hers. After all that she went through to take care of me, I owe her that much. And the last thing I want is for that bastard to have the satisfaction of killing me. I'll stay alive out of spite if I have to. On the night of the full moon, I went to look at the church alone, even though every instinct screamed that that was a bad idea. Unfortunately, the terms of the bet were that Reyna and Victor couldn't interfere with my search for the mechanic's name, so I wasn't left with much of a choice. Before I went, I let them know what I was doing, and I scheduled a text to be sent out automatically at certain times just in case something went wrong. With the shotgun secured to my back and the iron poker attached to my belt, I was as ready as I was ever going to be. After some time driving around the lake, I discovered a large stone structure poking out from the edge of the water. The moment my gaze fell upon its ruined steeple, my chest became cold. My first thought was that the church wasn't hungry for me. It only offered salvation to the wicked, and I was not fit for consumption. But why did I think that? Where did that come from? The lake was eerily quiet. No frogs, crickets, nothing. Even the wind was silent. The water was still, as if frozen in time. It was like the entire forest knew that this church didn't belong and was doing its best to avoid it. The arched doorway, located by the base of the steeple, gaped like an open mouth, seeming to swallow what little light was available. The doors looked to have disappeared long ago. The moonlight created a trail right up to the entrance. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, surprised to find that the water was far more shallow than I'd thought. By the time I got close enough to the church to peer into the doorway, I reached my knees. Even though the entryway was within arm's reach, I still couldn't see inside. I retrieved my flashlight from my tool belt, and it did nothing to alleviate the darkness. With another sigh, I passed through the doorway. In pitch blackness, I trudged through knee-deep water until I was greeted by dim gray candlelight. The small flame surrounded an antlered statue depicting the white son of mist, his head tilted, hand reaching out as if beckoning. The candles all bore those strange gray flames, reflecting eerily in the dark water flooding the church. On the wall behind the statues were tendrils of what I thought were vines at first, but once my eyes adjusted, it turned out to be black thorns. They twitched. Every once in a while, the pulsing would reveal torn flesh encased in the plant coils. Against my will, one of the mechanic's memories came to my mind. Black thorns drink the blood of the unworthy. I shuddered, looking away from the thorns. The ledger. I had to find it, and then get the hell out of this place. My hagstone had remained still this whole time, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something just as bad, or if not worse than the mechanic, was in that church somewhere. I waded through to the first door that I saw to the statue's right, even though I am certain I saw its head turn to look at me in the reflection of the water. When I glanced back, it hadn't appeared to move. Its reflection was back to normal as well. I know what I saw, and I know from experience that the hunt loves to fuck with people's heads. I entered the room to find what had looked like a dining hall, and the air was heavy with this musk of lavender tinged with the metallic stench of blood. Shining the flashlight around, there were rows of tables set up, illuminated by more ghostly candles. On shining platters, fresh viscera was served, topped with the small purple petals of lavender flowers as a garnish. Here's another thing Yins need to know about the neighbors. Never eat their food. Otherworldly feasts will rob you of all earthly pleasures, without the love and the comfort of food or family, trapped somewhere between life and death. However, it should be noted that the outright refusal of a neighbor's hospitality is an egregious offense. Don't eat the food, but be clever about it. On the subject of the hunter's feast, I'd bet money that that's how the bird-like lesser hunters are made, either by tricking humans into consuming the food or force-feeding them. I turned back quickly, not wanting to take the risk of something seeing me and so kindly inviting me to join it for dinner. When I returned to the room with the statue, surprisingly, it was still there in the exact same position it had been before. I was waiting for it to follow me. I know that thing had moved earlier. Next, I tried a door located behind the suspicious statue. This room, unlike the others, was flooded. Shelves, as far as the eyes could see, were overflowing with books. It smelled musty, like some of them had gotten damp. How big was this place? Under my breath, I swore. How the hell was I going to find the right one? In the memory, the ledger had already been opened when the mechanic was signing in, making it so that I wouldn't know what the spine or the cover even looked like. Unsure, I pulled off the nearest book, thumbing through the pages. I should have anticipated that they wouldn't be in English. My heart sank as it occurred to me that, even if I somehow found the correct ledger, I wouldn't be able to read it. The hagstone shook. Splashes. Outside the door. I went still, ears pricked. Whatever was moving in the statue room stopped, probably listening for me as well. I didn't move, even slowing my breathing down in an effort to remain as quiet as possible. After what felt like hours, but in reality couldn't have been any longer than 5 minutes, the thing outside splashed again, going in the direction of the dining hall I'd found earlier. The further away it got, the slower the hagstone shake became. The door creaked open and then slammed shut. I flipped through the pages of the book in my hand more, even looking at it through the hagstone to see if anything would change. Nothing. Hold on. The book smelled oddly of fresh snow. When I replaced it and selected another, the pages had the scent of dead leaves. Did that mean that the one the mechanic signed smelled like black cherries? I started going through each one, trying to find the right scent. Sea spray, carrion, lilac, gooseberries. My nose began to itch from the variety as they all began to blend together. There were still so many more to search. A door opened in the statue room again, as whatever was out there waded through the water. The hagstone indicated that it was getting closer. Not wanting to find out the hard way what was coming, I ducked behind one of the bookshelves that was tall enough to conceal me. The library door opened. My heart pounded as the thing's footsteps caused waves to chum through the water. A small, quivering voice whimpered, "Someone help me." It stepped further into the room, only the bookcases I hid behind separating us as it sobbed. "Please, is anyone there? Please." Yeah, it was obviously a trap. I didn't need to be a pest control specialist to know that. It continued down the rows of books, continuing to plead for help that it didn't need. Meanwhile, I tried to stay as still as possible, It eventually grew tired of trying to lure me out, with one huge splash, and then all of a sudden, nothing. The water was still as the waves died. Where did it go? Without moving my head, I glanced around, knowing that it wasn't gone. It was hiding, waiting for me to come out. That's when I saw movement above me. It hung to the ceiling, using the hooks on its leathery wings. For a while, we just stared at each other, me afraid to move, it waiting to see what I would do. Its voice floated down to me. I know why you're here. It didn't sound small and frightened anymore. Its voice was now a deep, menacing hiss. Finding my voice, I responded, Then you know you can't interfere. After a pause, it said, I do. It detached from the ceiling, gliding down to land on top of the bookcases in front of me. I raised my shotgun. The hunter tilted its head. Like the statue in the hall, he had antlers protruding from his long dark hair. And though this hunter's thorns were entwined with black thorns matching the ones I saw growing in the wall, the thorns wove over where it would have made sense for its eyes to have been. Instead, there was smooth, featureless pale skin above its nose and oddly full lips. Symbols were carved into his torso, swirling along his muscular shoulders. While the upper half of his body was humanoid, the lower half was hoofed legs covered with shaggy, black fur. The hunter spoke again, without moving his mouth. I can see why the captain wants you. If he hadn't already claimed you, I'd be tempted to take you for myself. I cocked my shotgun. The hunter laughed, lips still closed. Whoa, easy now. Leave me alone to continue my search, if you please. The hunter snorted, crouching to sit on top of the bookcase, crossing one of his furry legs over the other. Go right ahead. I won't stop you. I'll just be here, making sure you don't take anything other than what you came for. Afraid to turn my back on the hunter, I sidestepped my way out from where I'd been hiding, keeping my shotgun trained on him. Even though he didn't have eyes, from what I could see, I had no doubt that he was watching every move I made. Glancing between the hunter and the nearest shelf, I pulled out another book. When I looked back at the hunter, I saw that he'd moved closer. Feeling somewhat silly, I sniffed the book, not wanting to shift my hold on the shotgun. I'll do. I put it back. The brief second that it took for me to do that, the hunter was now seated on the bookshelf closest to me. He laughed when I flinched back, raising my shotgun at him again. Distracting me counts as interference, I told him. The hunter flexed his wings before folding them against his back. Someone's got to make sure that you're not going to leave with something you shouldn't. We don't take kindly to thieves around here. I'm sure you saw the ones in my thorns out there. I have no intention of taking anything else. Now please allow me to continue my search. The hunter shrugged, laying on his side, resting his cheek on his hand. As I said, don't let me stop you. He was just going to be a pain in the ass. Between the deal and the hagstone, this hunter couldn't do anything. I just had to ignore him the best I could. As I examined another book, the hunter kept going. So, I gotta ask, do you think that even if you manage to succeed, and that's a big if, that this will all be over? That you'll get to go back to terrorizing our kind without any repercussions? With all due respect, I don't terrorize your kind. I do what I can to keep yours and mine from killing each other. Is that what you think? He scoffed. Your ancestors were the ones that forced us out of our own homes, confined us to mounds below the ground. And what did you do with what you took? You destroyed it. And you destroy it more each day, poisoning the water, shrinking our forests. The hunter got angrier with each word as he spoke, until he was practically snarling at me. The book I held also wasn't the right one. I put it back, selecting another. God, where was it? The hunter slid off the bookcases, splashing me with water, and then continued his tirade. "You don't deserve the world you stole. I'll tell you again, Orion. We don't take kindly to thieves around here. We know that it's just human nature to take." I resisted the urge to pull away from him or to defend myself. It wouldn't matter to him that the events he spoke about happened long before I was ever born. Before Ireland was even a country. And just keep looking. You can't do anything. The next book smelled of brimstone, and the one beside it reeked of harsh chemicals. "Nothing to say, Orion," he growled. With the state he was in, saying anything, no matter what it was, would probably piss him off more. I kept going. Cherry blossoms. Oh, come on. The hunter's voice suddenly got low. "Ignore me if you want. Make a difference. Whether it's in my thorns or in the captain's willows. You belong to the hunt. Keep it up and I'll find your name next." But I didn't say that, thinking that silence was still best. I fruitlessly went through more books as the hunter continued to try to be a thorn in my side. Pun intended. I'll see myself out now. "You know, after we take you, the witch doctor is next. The captain has no interest in her, so that'll fall to me. I won't have to do nearly as much for her as he's had to do for you. Hell, I don't even need to know her name. All it'll take is one kiss." His lips parted then, a horrible forked tongue lashed out, reaching down to his chest in a wide arc. Even though the thought of what he wanted to do to Raina filled me with a mixture of rage and disgust, I calmly turned to glare at him, breaking my silence to say, "Are you done?" His entire body stiffened. I don't think he cared for that comment. "Would you be so bold if you didn't have the captain's claim to protect you?" he challenged. "I'll take that as a no," I muttered. I withdrew a particularly hefty book. Wait, black cherries. I quickly flipped through it, even though I couldn't understand what it said. Yes, that was definitely the scent of black cherries. I breathed out a sigh of relief, clutching it to my chest with one arm, and the other one still holding my shotgun. Softly, from the statue room, the banjo strings were being plucked. Fuck me. The other hunter had vanished. A soft melody was playing, similar to the one that the mechanic had used to force me to fall asleep. The hagstone was going crazy, quivering as it protected me from his spell. I quickly explored the library, looking for another door. A woman's deep voice whispered from behind one of the stacks. "It won't do you any good. There's only one way in or out." Not trusting the word of a hunter, I tried anyway. The first door led me to more books. The second stored cadavers, the smell of rotting flesh making me gag. And the whole time, the mechanic kept his tune going. The woman's voice crooned, "If you give your soul to me willingly, I'll be kinder. Kinder than anyone else." I didn't respond, propping my gun up on top of the thick ledger as best I could, and then I marched to the door. The mechanic had dropped his disguise. Normally, he appeared as a lean, pretty young man whose hair can't decide if it wants to be blonde or brown. The being holding the banjo was covered in iridescent chitin that reminded me of armor, clawed fingers grazing the strings. 2 pairs of wings spread from his back, like that of a dragonfly. Similar to the thorned hunter, he didn't have eyes. Spikes rose from his head to form an organic crown. His lipless mouth revealed sharp teeth, bared in a permanent, grotesque grin. The mechanic's head lifted to face me. "Howdy." I kept the gun trained on him as I sidled towards the door. He kept playing as the hagstone rattled against my collarbone. "Looks like you found something. Not trust our librarian made you feel welcome." He plucked the strings then. One of the candles suddenly flew towards me, and I ducked, shielding the ledger against my chest. The mechanic continued, "You know, it's funny. I went to go get you records today, but Well, the nice man behind the desk said he couldn't find you. How about that? Nothing for a woman formerly known as Fiona Cassidy. Either you're a ghost or you pulled some bullshit. He swiped the strings again, a wave of water throwing me against the wall. Both the ledger and the gun slipped from my hands as I hit it roughly, and the wind being knocked out of my lungs. He's found a loophole with the hagstone. As long as he didn't try to directly enchant me and just acted upon objects, it couldn't do anything to shield me. I dove for the ledger just as he plucked the strings again, directing the water to pull it toward him. Keeping one hand on it, I felt for the shotgun. A wave hit me in the face, and sour, rancid water invading my mouth and nose. I sputtered, gasping for air, turning my head as another aquatic assault slammed into me, knocking me on my ass. Through some miracle, I managed to keep a hold of the ledger. I scrambled in the water to move, and my fingers brushing the shotgun's comb. The water launched me into the wall again, but this time I was ready for it, gripping onto both objects for dear life. Once the wave had dropped me to the ground, I took aim at the mechanic only to find that he'd disappeared. Movement out of the corner of my right eye, and I fired toward it. Suddenly, the mechanic was at my left side, waving his finger at me tauntingly before disappearing again, the sound of his wings echoing through the hall. He was too fast. I wouldn't be able to shoot him. I tucked the ledger under my arm, sliding the gun onto my back, and then I withdrew the iron poker from my belt. When I found that the mechanic was hovering by the statue, I pointed at him. I do have to say, I regret one thing. You know what that is, pup? He stared as he nonchalantly toyed with the strings. No, but I'm sure you're going to tell me anyway, I grumbled. To my surprise, he laughed, the dim gray light glinting off those huge teeth. Well, look at you acting all tough. Now, as I was saying, I regret comparing you to your old man. Souls like his are fast food, you know, quick and easy to get, but ultimately not all that satisfying. He disappeared in the blink of an eye once again. Holding the fire poker out, I glanced around as I crept towards the exit. I heard the strings first, then was battered by another wave. I managed to stay upright, even as my knees wobbled. Without looking, I whirled around, poker at the ready. I managed to catch the mechanic on the shoulder. He staggered, appearing shocked that I'd managed to get a hit in on him. Without giving him any time to react, I swung again, and the hit forcing his head to turn as I battered the side of his head. While he was stunned, I raced for the exit. The water began to flow against me, but I managed to keep going, even as the current threatened to yank me off my feet, and it grew stronger. Using the poker, I stabbed into the ground, using it as a walking stick to keep myself upright. The moonlit forest was right in front of me, just a bit further. The water churned violently around me, causing me to slip. With a gasp, I clung to the poker, using all that I had left to keep myself from being pulled back into the church. After a terrifying minute of struggling and slipping, my feet finally found traction. I finally made it out to the forest with the ledger still under my arm. The current abruptly stopped, causing me to stumble a bit. My back and shoulders arched, already bruising from the beating I just endured. I could tell already that it was going to be one of those injuries that hurts more the next day. Fighting the water had taken most of the energy I had left, but I knew that it wasn't over yet. I had to keep going, splashing behind me. I glanced back to see that the mechanic had followed me, appearing human once he crossed the church's threshold, banjo still in hand. He sported a nasty, dark bruise along the entirety of his cheek. The skin surrounding it looked irritated as well, swollen and reddened. He was beyond pissed. Seeing his expression, I did my best to hurry. He was dangerous enough when he was in a good mood. I didn't want to know how much worse he could be. I had expected him to simply appear in front of me, the way he had at the church, but instead he just followed me, taking his time. Meanwhile, I was pushing myself to the limits, trying to get my tired body to move faster than a walk. I'll admit, I didn't expect you to get this far, he called after me, his words clipped with rage. You're becoming a real pain in the ass, pup. You wanted things to be exciting, didn't you? I trudged to shore, waiting for another wave to swipe at me, but it never came. When I glanced over my shoulder, he disappeared. My heart pounded as I tried to figure out where he'd gone. There was no way he'd just give up. He'd been ready to kill. I quickly stumbled in the direction of my car. Once I had almost reached it, I heard the sound of the banjo strings, followed by a deafening crunch. My G6 groaned, the back end tilting forward to slam onto the ground. He'd cut my car in half. Instinct told me to hit the ground. I did, just as a piece of metal whizzed past where my head had just been. Running purely on adrenaline, I scrambled deeper into the woods, just trying to get some distance on him. But how do you outrun something that can move in the blink of an eye? Some of our resources about the wild hunt state that hunters have been known to chase their victims until their bodies give out from exhaustion. I think that's what the mechanic's goal is right now. He damn near succeeded. I had already been wiped out from the fight at the church. Having to keep running while my lungs burned and muscles tremored was pure torture. I kept going, even as my anatomy screamed at me to stop. And each time I slowed, he was right there, spurring me on again. Eventually I collapsed by a river, dropping all that I carried as I caught myself. I coughed roughly, my entire body shaking. But then a voice urgently called, "Huntsman, I need her." The weeper. She stood in the water, her pale hair and eyes practically glowing in the moonlight as she stared the mechanic down. He stepped out from somewhere behind me. I didn't have to see his face to know that he was annoyed for the interruption. "For what?" he snapped. "She owes me." I think I heard her voice falter a bit, but then she went right back to sounding powerful. "She must enjoy my song before she dies." As I gasped for breath, my arms trembling as they kept me from falling face first onto the ground, I watched the weeper in disbelief. She's helping me? The mechanic was not having it. "She's here now. Sing your song and get it done with." The weeper quickly replied, "The stipulation was that she had to enjoy the performance. How much enjoyment can she derive with you here? And after you've chased her within an inch of her life, no less." The mechanic's head tilted towards the sky, releasing a deep breath of frustration. The weeper spoke again, her voice grave. "You know what it means to interfere with another's oath. Even you aren't above such rules, huntsman." 2 days. They negotiated, the weeper trying to buy me more time while he impatiently refused it. After a bit more back and forth, the weeper eventually got him to settle for 4 days. He gave me one last vicious look before he disappeared into the trees. The moment we were alone, the weeper sprinted out of the river, her cold, damp hands delicately clutching my flushed cheeks. Her touch felt nice, an assurance that I wasn't about to drop dead. She did a double take when she saw the ledger lying on the ground next to me, her eyes growing huge as she whispered, "Where did you get that?" "He started hunting me. Before that I had no choice." I managed to get out between breaths. I don't remember what happened after that. Most likely I'd blacked out, the lack of sleep and overexertion all catching up with me at once. The automatic SOS text had been sent to my coworkers while I was unconscious. Raina later informed me that when she and Victor found me, the weeper had my head resting in her lap. I came to in Victor's bed, feeling like hellfire was flowing through my limbs. When I went to shower off the grime from the lake, I discovered that my entire back was purple with bruises. Along with that, my chest ached, and I had a terrible cough. And guess who got pneumonia from breathing in stupid church water? Granted, it's a mild case, but it's just a cherry on top of the cake. After all this, I think I earned the right to gripe a bit. The Z-Pack is helping, though. Victor asked me if I had anything to do with the bruise on the mechanic's face. When I told him about my showdown with the mechanic, he gave me a small smile, saying, "God, I wish I could have seen that." I hope he gets a chance to smack the mechanic too someday. Currently, the ledger is hidden with all of our other important things, in Raina's apartment, until we can find someone who is willing and able to translate it. Initially, I had been worried that it had gotten damaged during the whole water war, but thankfully it was unscathed. My guess is that it's protected by magic. I think I might have an idea of who to ask to translate the book. I'll be seeing her in a few days to hear her sing. Wish me luck.